Gambling addiction is brutal. It's cunning, it's powerful, it's baffling. It pummeled me for a number of years. On this channel, I like to talk about my recovery. I like to talk about my experience with it. Guys, it's Matt. I am a compulsive gambler in recovery, and I like to think of myself as your mind and movement mentor, here to help you. So, big one today, because this topic is huge, enormous, and took me ages to learn. It took me, I should rephrase that, took me ages to truly internalize. I think on some level I logically understood it, but for it to actually penetrate into my thick skull was a bit of a different matter that took a lot longer. I've spoken before about the idea of a big problem with gambling addiction is the euphoric recall of it, which is where you remember the real high points, and the holy grail of your thinking is to try to get back to those moments. And I feel like there's a number of problems here. One is there's a pressure in life, in society, to be happy. And often we confuse happiness with euphoria, times that we've truly felt euphoric, which, to be honest, are often few and far between. And then we kind of feel like if we're not euphoric, we're unhappy. So we chase that feeling of euphoria, which is in many ways a fallacy, totally unsustainable, and makes it harder to sit with ourselves and just judge ourselves as things being okay. Not getting too high with the highs, not getting too low with the lows. And this is amplified enormously with gambling addiction, absolutely enormously. Because you do remember certain states that you've been in, certain times that may be locked into your nervous system as truly great in that moment, albeit quite fleeting. And you think back to them and you want to repeat them. You know, there's a couple of times, a couple of big ones for this for me that stand out as gambling times that I often almost get nostalgic about and feel like I kind of miss. You know, one of which was I was in a betting shop in Basingstoke, close to where I live. This was years ago. This must have been 20 years ago, 2005-ish. And I've just had a big roulette win on the FOBT machines, the fixed odds betting terminals. And I'm over by the guy, cashier guy, and he's had to set the safe so that he can pay me out. And he's got his bands round the money and he's counting out the money, and I'm sort of nonchalantly propping up the counter like, look at me, I've just kind of won all this money. And I'm happy to an extent. The adrenaline's kicked in, the brain endorphins are on fire. I've won more than I thought I was going to. Probably at some point I was down and I was chasing that, and I just got out of jail and 6 of my big numbers came in consecutively, or maybe even more, and I'm increasing my bets and I've won a lot of money. I'm standing there, and this was quite new to my gambling at this time. So this was probably 2004, 2005 time. And I remember Wimbledon was on, which ironically is on at the moment. And I remember as he's counting out all this money, I looked up at the betting odds for the tennis. And it was just about to start the Wimbledon tournament. I think it was the weekend before it started on the Monday, and it had the listing of all the odds of the men's championship. And I remember seeing Roger Federer being 1-5 on to win the tournament. This was before a ball was hit. This was when he was absolutely unplayable on grass. Fantastic athlete. And I remember just sat there, the sun's out, it's summertime, this guy's counting out my money. I look up, I was like, wow, you can bet on tennis. And I like Federer. God, they think he's going to win. What a time to be alive. And I never even bet on that tournament. But often when I see Roger Federer on the TV, I think of that moment. It's like it was frozen in time in my mind's eye, in kind of like my nervous system, where it's like, this is a high moment. This is a high octane, peaceful, great moment. That in some ways I almost yearn for that kind of thing of just, I guess back then I was a fair bit younger. I didn't have the life commitments that I've got now. It was a bit more easy come, easy go, both with kind of cash flow, and this was before I started my business. And it's just funny to think about, like a bit like if someone's ever given you really life-changing advice, the soundbite stays in your head, and you can probably remember where you were when they said it. You might remember what they were wearing, and it's like you can see it in your mind's eye as like a screenshot, like a photo's been taken. And that was a really big one for me. Another one was I follow Reading Football Club. I live quite local to there. So a couple of years ago, there'd been a few games where Reading there hadn't been many goals in the game. And I think I've shared before on the channel, I'm a sucker for the gambler's fallacy. If there wasn't many goals in the last 4 games, this is the 5th game, there's definitely going to be a lot of goals in this game. And that would be my logic. That would be my reverse engineered rationale of kind of how I would bet. And we were playing Fulham, Reading were playing Fulham at home. And I think I bet on more than over 1.5 goals in the first half. So essentially 2 or more. And then I bet on over 3 goals in the match, 4 goals in the match, 5 goals in the match. And I think that was it. But the odds on there being over 5.5 goals, so essentially 6 or more, are quite long. It's usually probably 3-4 to 1. And I had a lot of money on every bet. And I think this was when I was on a bit of a run at the time, and I just felt like it was going to happen. I went to the match on a Tuesday night, and it was 1-0, and Fulham scored in the last kick of the first half, no exaggeration, in injury time, to make it 2-0 to Fulham. And so my first one had come in by 1.5 goals, and then it went mad in the second half, and it ended up Reading 0, Fulham 7. And every bet came in, and I had a lot of money staked on each one. So I've won a fortune in my world, and I'm sat there with the Reading fans who are absolutely furious. A lot of them have left early, furious that they've just seen their home team annihilated at home by Fulham, who, to be fair, were so much better, both in the league and on the night. And I remember just kind of almost sat there looking around me with this sort of wry smile on my face, almost kind of like smirking to myself, thinking, what have I done here? Look at me. What a haul. I have called this beautifully. All these people around here that are thinking, you know, Reading, they sacked the manager, who have just lost 7-0 at home, and I'm just there like, what a good night. And I remember practically skipping out of the stadium back to my car, which was so ironic based on the fact that I'm walking with all of the home fans who are banging their programmes on their hands, talking about, can't believe this, was unacceptable, your players have rolled over, you know, someone should have stopped it at 3 or 4-0 and just, you know, shut up shop, how's this happened? And I just remember this kind of, this blasé, no worries, again, what a time to be alive. You know, and for that was a key one that night, because more often than not, when I had wins, I would immediately think about what's next all the time. 99 times out of 100, it would be like, I won, but when's the next game? I won, when's the next game? Who's playing tomorrow? But on that night, for whatever reason, because it was so unexpected, and because it was so, I was going to say profitable is the wrong word, I was able to kind of almost sit with the win for way longer than I'd ever done in the past, and actually, I suppose, enjoy it and sit with the, look at me, how have I called that? Fantastic. Getting my slips out. Right, that's that much. God, I can't even count it up. I'll have a look when I get home. Folding my slips up nicely, put them in my back pocket, tap in my pocket every so often, making sure they're still there because they're worth a small fortune and haven't fallen out on the road. And, you know, I'm going to have some awkward moment where I'm going to have to go in and say, you owe me a fortune, but I've lost my slips. And I think about that. I think about that night. And the problem is, it's not sustainable. It's incredibly few and far between, if I can get my words out, as to when that happened. I can't think back through rose-tinted glasses and think that was what it remotely resembled my gambling career. That was just two moments that stand out, but they do sit with me as very, very easy to visualize. And it's almost hard to tell the stories with not having a bit of a smile on my face. And there's probably some NLP trick I could do or something like that where I could minimize those experiences. You know, like when they think of it in the top corner of a television and then kind of fading away into, so it starts in full picture and then it kind of goes off into, to try and remove the potency of them, because I do think about that. And it's those kind of memories that kind of stick with you and say, it is psychologically, is that euphoric recall. You know, the addiction wants me to remind me of that, to forget about the times where I didn't have a pot to piss in and I lost all of what I'm talking about. I won there and more 10 times over. That sort of fades into obscurity. And you have to be very, very careful. You have to have some level of self-awareness and knowledge of that. If I just sit and idealize those times and think another one's around the corner, it's so nice to be free. I was so free of my problems those nights. There was nothing that could have really, I was bulletproof. There was nothing that could have emotionally touched me because I'm in that bubble. I would say after that Reading game, I was almost bouncing like, you remember the old Soft Mints advert, Mr. Soft, where he's like kind of bouncing down the road, like just nothing could touch him. That was literally me walking out of the Medeski Stadium about 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And I suppose I would just say, if you do struggle with gambling addiction, you will no doubt have these memories. For a lot of people, it can be cards. A lot of people, it can be casinos for sure. And I've got one or two of those of, winning big money in front of a lot of people. There's always the glamorized, you're dressed up for the evening out in the casino. I've said about it before, the James Bond feel of being at the casino where you're with the croupier, where you're watching the live wheel spin round and that kind of thing. And it's very, very easy to diminish the times of real pain and problems that you had for gambling, which for me were zillions, and overemphasize and exaggerate and embellish those good times. And part of recovery for gambling is about walking that tightrope. It's about the balance between doing that, because the euphoric memories will always be there. The addiction will always steer you in those directions first and foremost. And you have to see them for what they are. You have to see them for very, very fleeting memories. And almost, even when I tell the stories about them, actually, were they that good? I was probably like that for a minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, but I certainly wasn't walking on water in absolute, ecstasy for the remainder of that day or the remainder of that week. But it's really interesting kind of how that can happen. And this doesn't get spoken about enough for my liking. And on this channel, I like to go down the rabbit hole about gambling addiction. Like I say, if I can help a handful or one other person kind of not walk the road that I walked for so long, that is my intention on this channel. And that's why I make this content, to raise awareness about a topic that I am incredibly, incredibly passionate about. So if you know anyone struggling with gambling, please feel free to share it with them. If you can subscribe to the channel, it helps me help support it and reach more people about a problem in society that, let's be honest, is only getting worse. And thanks so much for taking the time out to watch. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you in the next video very, very soon. Take care.